My name is Amelia Carter, and I'm 31 years old. On the surface, I probably look like the kind of woman who has everything under control. I run a logistics consulting firm. I solve problems for other people before they even realize those problems exist. I build systems, fix weak points, and make sure nothing collapses under pressure. People see the polished version now, the tailored suits, the calm voice, the quiet confidence. What they don't see are the years that came before it. I started my business in my mid-20s with a secondhand laptop, 2 unreliable clients, and so much anxiety I used to wake up at 4 in the morning, convinced everything was about to fail. For years, my life was nothing but 80-hour work weeks, cheap takeout, unpaid invoices, and spreadsheets glowing in dark rooms, while the rest of the city slept. I reinvested every spare dollar back into the company. I skipped vacations, ignored birthdays, and told myself all of it would mean something one day. About 2 years ago, it finally did. I landed one major contract, then another. My strange little niche in the logistics world, the thing people had once smiled at like it was a hobby, became wildly profitable almost overnight. Not flashy tech billionaire profitable, just steady, serious money. The kind that buys peace, the kind that lets you breathe. And for the last 3 years, that peace included Ethan. When I met him, he was 28 and working as a receptionist, though he talked about art the way some people talk about faith. He wanted to work in fine arts curation. He had the taste, the passion, the vocabulary, the hunger for it. What he didn't have were connections, stability, or the kind of financial freedom that lets someone chase a dream in a city designed to punish anyone without money. He was bright in a way that made rooms feel warmer, charming without seeming to try, expressive, open. The opposite of me in all the ways that felt irresistible. I was smitten before I admitted it to myself. He made my life feel less mechanical, less like a series of deadlines and negotiations. He brought color into corners of me I hadn't realized had gone gray. And when my business finally started bringing in real money, I did what I thought people in love were supposed to do. I used that stability to make room for his future too. I told him to quit the job he hated. I told him to focus on his art history studies, take the unpaid internships, go to gallery openings, network, and build the life he wanted instead of settling for one that barely covered rent. I said I would handle the rest until he got there. I didn't say it recklessly. I said it with my whole heart. I thought we were building something together, and I meant it. I paid for the apartment downtown, the one with huge windows, clean white walls, and enough natural light that he called it gallery light. Rent was $3,500 a month. I covered the lease on his Audi A5 II, $800 a month, co-signed under my own name because his credit wasn't strong enough at the time. There were the credit cards I added him to as an authorized user, the wardrobe he said he needed to look polished in art spaces, the groceries, the gym membership, the art supplies, the museum memberships, and all the little indulgences that stopped feeling little the moment I mentally added them up. I never held any of it over him, not once. At the time, it didn't feel transactional. It felt like partnership. I wasn't buying him. I was believing in him. There's a difference, and I knew it then as surely as I know it now. Or maybe I just wanted to. Tuesday was supposed to be our 3-year anniversary. I had reservations at a restaurant he'd been talking about for months. One of those impossible places with moody lighting, tiny portions, and desserts people photograph before they eat. I'd even left work early, which almost never happened, because I wanted to surprise him. In my bag was a small velvet box with a sapphire necklace inside. Nothing gaudy, just elegant. Deep blue, simple, understated. It reminded me of him somehow, or maybe of the version of us I thought still existed. When I got home, the apartment was quiet. No music from the kitchen. No voice calling out to ask if I was early. No half-finished coffee cup abandoned on the counter, just silence, too neat to be peaceful. I remember standing there in my heels, still holding my bag, and feeling something shift before I even knew why. At 7:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. For half a second, I smiled. I expected some harmless excuse, maybe that he was running late or trying to tease me into guessing where he was. Instead, I read, "I found someone else. I want nothing more to do with you." That was it. No greeting, no explanation, no apology. Just a clean blade slid between the ribs and withdrawn before I had time to understand I'd been cut. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Shock for me. didn't feel like numbness. It felt physical first, a tightness in my chest, a hollow drop in my stomach, a rushing in my ears, like my body was stepping away from me. I sat down very slowly on the edge of the sofa because my knees suddenly didn't seem reliable. The necklace box was still in my hand. I read the message again, then again. I found someone else. I want nothing more to do with you. 3 years. Reduced to 14 words. There was a brief moment where I almost broke exactly the way he probably expected me to. I almost called him. Almost typed a flood of frantic questions. Who is she? How long has this been going on? Was any of it real? What did I do wrong? But then something colder took over. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was survival. Maybe after years of building a company from nothing, some part of me had been trained to move toward damage with a clear head instead of panic. Whatever it was, it settled over me like ice. His message was brutal, but it was also unambiguous. Nothing more to do with you. He had drawn the line himself. So I typed back 3 words. As you wish. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Then I put my phone on silent, set the velvet necklace box on the kitchen counter, and opened my laptop. The shift in me was so complete it almost frightened me. 1 minute, I was a woman whose anniversary had just been detonated by text. The next, I was what I had always been at my core, precise, organized, calm under pressure. My heartbreak didn't disappear. It simply stepped aside while I handled the immediate problem. I logged into my banking portal first. The 2 credit cards Ethan used every day were easy. A few clicks, a verification code, and his access was gone. Immediate deactivation. Clean. Final. Next came the auto finance account. The Audi lease was in my name with him attached, not the other way around. I couldn't terminate everything that second, but I could stop the automatic payment due the following week. So I did. Then the apartment. That took a little longer. The lease was in my name too. I pulled up the rental agreement PDF, found the break clause, and read it twice. 60 days notice. 2 months rent penalty. Expensive, irritating, but manageable. More importantly, legal. Orderly. I drafted the email to property management, sent it from my primary account, and copied my personal email for a time-stamped record. After that, I moved through every subscription I could think of. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify Family Plan, Boutique Gym, Meal Delivery Service, Shared Cloud Storage, Shopping Accounts, Passwords changed, Profiles removed, Access revoked. Then the phone plan. By the time I finished, night had fully settled outside the windows. The apartment reflected back at me in dark glass, all soft lamps and expensive furniture, and the ghost of a life that, apparently, had already ended before I knew it was ending. 45 minutes. That was how long it took to dismantle the financial architecture of a 3-year relationship. When I was done, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just felt empty in a way that was almost elegant, like grief had stripped everything non-essential out of me and left only bone. I packed an overnight bag. I left the necklace on the kitchen counter where he would see it if he came back. Then I walked out of the apartment without turning my phone on again, because I already knew one thing with absolute certainty. If Ethan had truly meant what he said, then this was only the beginning. I stayed with my brother that night. His name is Owen, and he has always had the rare ability to look at a disaster without decorating it with false hope. He opened the door, saw the overnight bag in my hand and whatever was on my face, and simply stepped aside. "What happened?" "Ethan left," I said. He frowned. Left? I handed him my phone. He read the message once, then again, and for a long second he said nothing. His jaw tightened in that quiet way it always did when he was angry on my behalf. "That's it?" he asked finally. "That's how he did it?" I nodded. Owen looked like he wanted to say 10 different things, most of them violent, but instead he handed me the phone back and said, "You can take the guest room. I'll make tea." That almost broke me more than the text had, not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. It was gentle, normal, human, and after the cold, clinical brutality of Ethan's message, that small act of care felt sharp enough to split me open. But I still didn't cry. I sat at Owen's kitchen table with a mug warming my hands and told him the practical version of what had happened. Not the feelings, just the facts, the message, the cards, the lease, the car, the subscriptions. He stared at me over the rim of his mug. "You cut everything off tonight?" "Yes." A slow, grim smile touched one corner of his mouth. "Good. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. I don't know if that makes me cold or sane. It makes you someone who was just told, in writing, that she meant nothing, he said. You responded accordingly. The next morning, I expected chaos. Missed calls, dozens of texts, maybe even Ethan pounding on Owen's door in a fit of theatrical outrage. But when I turned my phone back on, there was nothing. Not a question, not an apology, not even anger. That silence unsettled me more than noise would have. It made the breakup feel premeditated, like he had sent the message only after making sure he was already somewhere else, already secure, already convinced he wouldn't need anything from me again. So I buried myself in work. For most of the week, I moved through my life with mechanical precision. I handled client calls, reviewed freight projections, fixed a routing error for a distribution partner, and answered emails in the same calm tone I always used. Outwardly, I was functioning, efficient, polished, untouched. Internally, I was split in two. One part of me kept revisiting the last few months, searching for the exact point where I should have known. The missed calls he had explained away, the distracted smiles, the nights he said he was exhausted from gallery events and fell asleep facing away from me, the way he had become more protective of his phone, more casual with my generosity, less warm whenever I asked ordinary questions about the future. The other part refused to look back at all. That was the part in charge. And for almost a week, Ethan gave me nothing. Then Friday hit. At 2:17 p.m., while I was reviewing a vendor compliance report, my phone buzzed once. Then again and again until the screen became a wall of notifications. Ethan. The first text was almost funny in its audacity. Hey, my card just got declined. Is there a banking issue? A minute later. Amelia? Then. I'm at lunch with people. Call me now. I stared at the messages without moving. There it was. Not sorrow. Not accountability. Not even curiosity about whether I was alive after being discarded like an old receipt. Just inconvenience. The next message came 2 minutes later. Did you cancel my cards? Not our cards. My cards. Then the tone shifted. You can't do that without telling me. That one almost made me laugh. I still didn't reply. More texts followed in waves. First confusion, then offense, then anger that seemed to rise in proportion to each practical consequence arriving at his feet like an invoice from reality. The Audi dealership called me. The payment failed. What did you do with the phone plan? The gym says my membership is inactive. Did you contact the building too? Amelia, answer me. I read every message and ignored every one. By evening, the tone softened into pleading, which disgusted me even more. Please don't do this. You know I need my things. My internship review is next week. My portfolio is in the apartment. Can we just talk like adults? Like adults, as though adults routinely end 3-year relationships by text and then expect a fully funded transition wrapped in civility. I turned the phone face down on my desk and kept working. That should have been the end of it. In any sane world, it would have been. He had ended the relationship. I had dissolved the financial arrangements tied to it. Cruel? Maybe, but not unclear, not unlawful, not illogical. But Ethan, I was beginning to understand, did not believe consequences applied to him the way they applied to other people. Saturday morning proved that. I was still at Owen's place when I got a call from the property manager. Her name was Judith, a woman in her late 50s with silver blonde hair, a dry voice, and the emotional warmth of a bank vault. Ms. Carter, she said, Mr. Hayes is in the lobby, and he's with a woman. For one strange second, I thought maybe I had misheard her. A woman? Yes, Judith said. An extremely confident woman. Of course. I stood and walked toward the window, though there was nothing to see except Owen's quiet street and my own reflection in the glass. What does he want? A key. I closed my eyes. He says he needs access to collect important personal materials, Judith continued. He also says you've behaved irrationally and that this is all a misunderstanding. And the woman? She's doing most of the talking. That told me almost everything I needed to know. I could picture it without being there. Ethan standing slightly behind someone prettier in confidence than in substance, letting her take control of the room while he rearranged himself into the victim. What did you tell them? That his name is not on the lease, Judith said crisply, and that access will not be granted without the leaseholder's permission. For the first time that morning, I felt something close to calm. Thank you. Judith made a small, dismissive sound. The other woman informed me that her boyfriend would not be treated this way if people in this building understood who he was. My fingers tightened around the phone. Her boyfriend. Yes, that was the wording. So there she was. Not theoretical. Not implied. Real enough to stand in a lobby and throw around possession like she had inherited the role. What does she look like? I asked before I could stop myself. Judith didn't hesitate. Expensive, or trying very hard to. That would have been funny if my chest hadn't felt hollow. Did they leave? Eventually, after she suggested we could make this very difficult for management. I almost smiled. And what did you say? I pointed to the no trespassing sign. That time I did smile. After the call ended, I stood in silence for a while, the image of them in that lobby replaying in my mind. Ethan and his new girlfriend. So new he had apparently already rehearsed bringing her into the ruins of my life. So comfortable that she felt entitled to speak for him. That afternoon, Ethan texted again. You can't just throw me out. My internship portfolio is in there. Judith said you canceled the apartment. You're ruining everything for no reason. I let the first few messages pass. Then another arrived. Vanessa says this is emotional retaliation and you can get in serious trouble for it. Vanessa. There it was. A name. A few seconds later, another text came through. She thinks you're acting unstable. That one finally did something to me. Not tears, not a meltdown, just a cold, total stillness. Because buried inside that sentence was something uglier than arrogance. It was strategy. He was already shaping a story. I wasn't just the ex who stopped paying for his life. I was the unreasonable woman. The bitter one. The unstable one. The one who couldn't handle being left. I forwarded every message to a folder. Then I took screenshots. Then I created a second folder. I don't know exactly when heartbreak turned into documentation, but once it did, I never turned back. By Sunday evening, the messages had become longer and more ridiculous. Vanessa says normal people don't destroy someone's life because they're hurt. Vanessa thinks you owe me time to transition. Vanessa says this could look really bad for you. I read each one with growing disbelief. He had left me. He had found someone else. He had ended everything with a text so cold it had practically stripped frost across the screen. And now, because I had stopped financing the life he no longer wanted to share with me, I was somehow the aggressor. That night, Owen found me at his kitchen table, laptop open, Ethan's messages arranged in careful rows across the screen. You're building a file, he said. Yes, that means you think this is going somewhere. I looked up at him. I think Ethan expected to leave me and keep the infrastructure. Owen's expression darkened. And now that he knows he can't, he's panicking. No, I said quietly, not panicking yet. The real escalation came Monday morning. At 8:06 a.m., an email arrived in my inbox with the subject line, Urgent, legal matter, requiring immediate attention. It was from a partner at a downtown law firm. He stated that he represented Ethan Hayes and needed to speak with me immediately regarding my sudden and malicious cessation of established financial support. I read that phrase 3 times. Sudden and malicious cessation of established financial support. For a second, I thought it had to be a joke. Some absurd bluff drafted to scare me into apologizing, reopening the cards, and quietly funding Ethan's exit from my life so he could avoid discomfort while moving on with another woman. But the signature block was real. The law firm was real. And the email ended with a request for urgent contact before they pursued all available remedies. I sat very still at my desk and felt the shape of the situation change. This was no longer just a breakup. This was a campaign. I didn't answer the email. Instead, I called the only person I trusted to deal with something like this without overreacting. My father's business attorney had retired the year before, but the firm had handed his clients to a man named Harrison Blake. I'd met him once at a holiday dinner, long enough to remember the iron gray hair, the dry eyes, and the kind of stillness that made people reveal too much while trying to fill the silence. His assistant got me in that afternoon. Owen insisted on driving me. You're not going alone, he said. I can manage a lawyer's office. That's not why I'm coming. I didn't argue. I was too tired. Harrison Blake's office was on the 19th floor of a downtown building with polished stone floors and windows so clean the skyline looked staged. His office itself was severe in the way expensive things often are. Dark wood, minimal decor, no clutter, just order. He greeted me with a brief handshake. Sit down, Amelia. Show me everything. So I did. I gave him the breakup text first, then the screenshots of Ethan's messages, then Judith's report about the lobby scene, then the email from Ethan's lawyer. Harrison read everything without interrupting. He didn't react to the betrayal, the cruelty, or even the absurdity. He just read, occasionally making a neat note on a yellow pad. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Well, he said mildly, it appears your former boyfriend has confused generosity with obligation. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. So I'm not crazy. No, he is trying to monetize your guilt. Owen gave a sharp laugh. That's exactly what this is. Harrison returned his attention to me. You were never married? No. No children? No. No jointly owned assets? No. No written agreement promising support? Nothing. He tapped the breakup text with one finger, and he ended the relationship himself. Yes. Harrison nodded slowly, as if a final box had been checked. Then there is no legal basis for this claim as presented. Gifts are gifts. Voluntary payments are voluntary payments. One adult choosing to finance another adult's lifestyle during a romantic relationship does not create a permanent duty of care once that relationship ends, particularly not when the recipient is the one who terminated it. The relief that moved through me was sharp enough to hurt. What do we do? I asked. We respond once, Harrison said. Briefly, cleanly, we state the facts. We establish representation. We make it clear that all future communication goes through me. Then we wait and see whether their courage survives contact with reality. By the time Owen and I left the office, Harrison's reply had already been drafted and sent. It was only a few paragraphs long. No bluster, no emotion, no insults. Just facts arranged with surgical precision. My client and Mr. Hayes were never married. They share no jointly held property. Any financial support provided during the course of their private relationship was voluntary and ceased upon the termination of that relationship by Mr. Hayes himself. Your characterization of these facts is rejected in full. Kindly direct all future communication through this office. That should have ended it. It didn't. The next message from Ethan's lawyer arrived the following day, and this time it was no longer pretending to be offended. It was negotiating. Harrison forwarded it to me with a one-line note. As expected, read and call me. I opened the attached letter at my desk and felt my jaw tighten with every paragraph. They were proposing what they called a confidential transitional support settlement. It was almost impressively shameless. The letter claimed Ethan had made significant emotional and professional investments during the relationship based on an understood pattern of ongoing support. It stated that the abrupt withdrawal of that support had caused him severe emotional distress, disruption to his career trajectory, and reputational harm. In the interest of avoiding lengthy and public litigation, they proposed that I continue paying his apartment rent and vehicle costs for 6 months, plus provide a one-time lump sum of $20,000. I read that part twice. $20,000. Apparently, the price of being dumped was now itemized. I called Harrison immediately. Is this real? I asked. Oh, it's real, he said. Legally absurd, but very real. They want 6 months of support and $20,000. Yes. For what exactly? For discovering that you have limits. I stood up from my desk and walked toward the window, too angry to remain still. So what now? Now we do nothing. Nothing? They want a reaction, Harrison said. More importantly, they want to convince you that peace can be purchased. If they had a viable claim, they would not be floating soft numbers and whispering about confidentiality. They would file. This is a shakedown in a suit. I was quiet. And if I don't pay? They either disappear, he said, or escalate emotionally because they can't escalate legally. That stayed with me. Escalate emotionally because they can't escalate legally. It turned out Harrison was right. The first sign came that Saturday. I was at the apartment for the first time since I'd left it, standing in the bedroom, trying not to notice the absence of Ethan's things in the closet, when Judith called again. Ms. Carter, she said, Mr. Hayes is here again. I closed my eyes. Alone? No. Of course not. With Vanessa? Yes. What do they want today? A key again, Judith said flatly, and they are suggesting, in increasingly creative ways, that management is exposing itself to liability by preventing him from retrieving his personal effects. That sounded like Ethan, borrowing legal language he didn't understand and repeating it like a spell. I assume you told them the same thing you told them before. I did. And Vanessa informed me that she and Ethan know developers and attorneys, and that people in this city remember who helps and who doesn't. I actually laughed at that. Would you like me to call building security? Judith asked. Have they tried to come upstairs? Not yet. They are currently performing indignation in the lobby. Call security if they push further, I said. And if they mention lawyers again, give them Harrison's contact information. Gladly. When the call ended, I stood in the still apartment and looked around. It was strange being back there. Ethan's favorite throw blanket was gone from the sofa. A framed print he loved had been removed from the hallway wall, leaving behind a lighter rectangle of paint, little signs of absence everywhere. On the kitchen counter, the velvet box was still where I had left it. He hadn't come back for it. For one stupid second, that hurt more than the legal threat had, not because of the necklace itself, but because of what it represented. I had come home that night full of softness, carrying something chosen with care, imagining gratitude, dinner, maybe laughter. And while I was moving toward that version of the evening, he had already been somewhere else entirely. I picked up the necklace box and put it in my bag. By evening, Ethan had started texting again. This time he no longer bothered to sound wounded. He sounded offended. "You are making this so much uglier than it needed to be. Vanessa says civilized people don't cut someone off overnight. The apartment manager is acting like I'm a criminal." Then, the Audi dealership called again. The payment failed. "That car is connected to your credit too. Are you seriously this stubborn?" I forwarded each message to Harrison without comment. Then came the one that made me stop. "Vanessa thinks you're doing this because you can't accept that I moved on." That sentence told me more than Ethan probably intended. Not just that Vanessa was heavily involved, but that together they had already settled on a story. In that story, I wasn't the woman who had been used, discarded, and then pressured for money. I was the bitter ex weaponizing finances because she couldn't handle rejection. It was disgusting. It was also useful, because once someone starts building a false narrative, they inevitably begin to over-explain it. They repeat. They embellish. They make mistakes. And mistakes, documented carefully enough, become leverage. So I kept documenting. The next morning, Harrison called me before I called him. "They sent another letter," he said. "Demanding more money?" "No, something better." "That sounds ominous." "It should. Mr. Hayes is now claiming your conduct has interfered with his internship prospects and emotional well-being to such a degree that continued financial support is necessary to mitigate further harm." I closed my eyes. He actually said that. He did. "So they're building a hardship narrative." "Yes," Harrison said, "poorly." I rubbed my temple. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing. Continue saving everything. Do not reply directly. Do not speak to him. Do not get drawn into emotional debates." Then he added, "If they are desperate enough to invent a dependency claim, they are desperate enough to behave badly when it becomes clear they won't be paid." What kind of badly? The kind that leaves evidence. He was right again. That Tuesday afternoon, I got another text from Ethan. Only this time it wasn't defensive. It was almost sweet. "Can we please just talk in person? I don't want lawyers involved if they don't have to be. I think Vanessa might have made things worse." Then another message arrived. "I just need to get my things and move on. We can be adults about this." The tone was too soft, too sudden, too convenient. I sent the screenshots to Harrison. His reply came 10 minutes later. "Do not meet him alone. If he wants property returned, we will supervise it formally." So that was what we arranged. A supervised move-out. Neutral movers. Inventory list. Specific time. Personal belongings only. Harrison would attend. Ethan's lawyer would attend. No improvising. No emotional conversations. No scenes. Everything controlled, everything documented. But the minute we set the date, I felt something low and uneasy unfold in my stomach. Because people like Ethan only liked rules when the rules protected them. And if he had already failed to frighten me, failed to shame me, and failed to invoice his way back into comfort, then a controlled setting was the one thing left that might finally force him to understand he was not getting what he wanted, which meant almost certainly that he would try something else. The move out was scheduled for Saturday morning at 10. By Thursday, everything was already in place. Harrison had drafted a clean inventory list. Clothing, personal documents, toiletries, art materials, and electronics that could reasonably be argued as his. Nothing purchased solely by me. Nothing ambiguous, no furniture, no decor, no shared sentimental items, twisted into leverage. Neutral movers were hired, paid in advance, and instructed clearly. Move only what is listed, nothing else. If there's resistance, stop and call. Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Bennett, confirmed attendance at 10 a.m. Harrison would be there at the same time. I wouldn't. That had been Harrison's recommendation. "You don't need to be physically present," he told me. "Let me handle this." I didn't like the idea of not being there, not because I wanted to argue, but because I wanted to see him. Not the version of Ethan I had loved. The real one. The one who had written that message. The one who had tried to invoice my silence. Still, I trusted Harrison. So I stayed away. At 9:45 a.m., I was sitting in Owen's living room with my laptop open but untouched when my phone rang. "Unknown number." I answered anyway. "Ms. Carter," a man's voice said. "This is Daniel from the moving company." My stomach tightened. "Yes. Mr. Hayes and a woman are already here. They're saying their lawyer is running late, but they want to get started." Of course they did. Where are you right now? In the building lobby. They're asking us to come upstairs. No, I said immediately. Do not go upstairs. Do not move anything until my lawyer arrives. There was a brief hesitation. They're being pretty insistent. I don't care. You were hired by me. You follow my instructions. No access until both lawyers are present. Okay, understood. I hung up and immediately called Harrison. They're early, I said, and their lawyer is late. They're trying to start without you. There was no surprise in his voice. Yes, I expected that. You did? People who intend to test boundaries always arrive before the rules are fully enforced. I exhaled sharply. The movers are holding them in the lobby. Good. I'm 10 minutes away. Tell them to hold their position. I hung up and stared at my phone. Something about this felt deliberate. At 10:02, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. We're already here. This doesn't need to be complicated. I didn't reply. Another message followed. Vanessa thinks it's ridiculous we have to wait like this. Then, we can just take my stuff and go. You don't need to make a scene. I stared at the screen, a slow, cold clarity settling in. He wasn't trying to avoid a scene. He was trying to create one without witnesses who understood the rules. I forwarded the messages to Harrison. His reply came a minute later. Almost there. Do not engage. At 10:11, Daniel called again. They're getting louder. Define louder. Vanessa says we're obstructing them. She's telling us we don't understand the situation, that everything in the apartment belongs to Ethan. Of course she is. And Ethan? He's letting her talk. That told me everything. Stay where you are, I said. My lawyer is almost there. At 10:18, a text from Ethan came through. We're coming up. I felt something inside me go very still. I didn't respond. I called Harrison again. They just said they're coming upstairs. I'm in the elevator, he said. Tell the movers to stand their ground. No one enters without me. I relayed the message immediately. At 10:24, Daniel called again. Ms. Carter, your lawyer just arrived. I exhaled slowly. Good. And things are getting handled. Walk me through it. Your lawyer came in, asked who Mr. Hayes was, and then asked where his lawyer was. I could already hear Harrison's tone in my head. What did Ethan say? He said his lawyer was on the way and that we could start without him. And Harrison? Daniel gave a short, almost impressed laugh. He said no. That sounded right. He told them that until both legal representatives were present, no items would be moved. Period. I closed my eyes for a second, imagining it. What did they do? Vanessa started arguing. She said this was harassment, that you were being vindictive, that we were all complicit in it. And your lawyer just looked at her. I couldn't help it. I smiled. And then he asked her if she was a party to the lease. A beat. She said no. Of course she did. And he told her, very politely, that her opinions were not legally relevant to the situation. That time I actually laughed. What about Ethan? He tried to step in after that, Daniel said. Said you were overreacting, that you were just upset and trying to punish him. My fingers tightened around the phone. And Harrison? He asked him to repeat that. I blinked. What? He said, I'd like you to repeat that statement while I'm recording, please. I stared at nothing, the image snapping into focus so clearly it almost felt like I was there. What did Ethan do? He stopped talking. Of course he did. What happened next? There was an argument about the furniture. Vanessa said the TV, the desk, the mattress, stuff like that, were gifts, that they belonged to Ethan. I felt my jaw tighten. And Harrison? He had receipts. Of course he did. He showed them, all in your name. He said if they attempted to remove anything not on the approved list, he would be calling the police for attempted theft. I went very still. And? They tried to move the TV anyway. They what? They lifted it, Daniel said. Both of them. Like they were just going to walk out with it. For a second, I didn't feel anything. Then something cold and sharp settled into place. And what happened? Our lead mover stepped in front of them, told them to put it down, said if they didn't, his next call would be to the police. And did they? Not right away. Then your lawyer repeated the same thing, but more formally. And then they put it down. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. After that, Daniel said, they grabbed the boxes on the list and left. Only the approved boxes. Everything else remained in the apartment exactly where it had been. I leaned back against the couch, the tension draining from my shoulders. It was over, at least that part of it. The confrontation, the attempted theft, the illusion that they could bend the situation if they just pushed hard enough. And yet, as I picked up my phone and looked at the last message Ethan had sent, "We're coming up," I felt something shift, because that hadn't been panic. That had been certainty. And people don't walk into situations like that with certainty, unless they believe, deep down, that they are still in control. Which meant one thing. He hadn't learned yet. By Sunday morning, I thought it might finally quiet down. Not because Ethan had learned anything, because people like him usually disappear the moment a direct approach fails. They retreat, regroup, look for easier angles. For a few hours, it felt like that's what had happened. No texts, no calls, no emails. Just silence. I spent most of the morning at my apartment for the first time since the move out, standing in the middle of a space that no longer felt like it belonged to the version of me who had lived there before. The furniture was still in place because Ethan had only taken the approved boxes. Everything else remained. But something intangible had shifted. The air felt lighter, cleaner. I opened the windows and let the city noise bleed in. For the first time in days, I wasn't thinking about Ethan. That didn't last. At 11:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. It wasn't him. It was a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Lena, a junior curator at the gallery where Ethan had been interning. We'd met a few times at events. Polite conversations. Nothing close. Her message was short. "Hey, I'm not sure if you've seen this. Thought you should." A screenshot followed. I opened it, and for a second, I didn't fully process what I was looking at. It was Ethan. A selfie. Eyes slightly red. Expression carefully composed, somewhere between exhausted and fragile. The kind of face that suggests vulnerability without surrendering control of how it's perceived. The caption read, "Finally escaping a financially controlling and emotionally abusive relationship. It's terrifying starting over, but I'm grateful for the people showing me what real support looks like." #healing. #new chapter. I stared at the words, read them again and again. Something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. Because this wasn't anger anymore. This was narrative. He wasn't reacting. He was rewriting. In his version of the story, he wasn't the man who had left a woman after 3 years of financial support. He wasn't the one who had tried to demand 6 months of continued funding and a payout. He wasn't the one who had shown up early with a new girlfriend and attempted to take property that wasn't his. He was the victim, the survivor, the one who had escaped. And I was the abuser. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Sharper, more deliberate. I looked at the timestamp on the post. It had been up for hours, which meant people had already seen it, already formed opinions, already started building a version of me in their heads that I hadn't consented to. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Lena. "It's spreading. People are talking." Of course they were. The art world is small. Reputation isn't just important there, it's currency. And Ethan had just tried to spend mine. I took screenshots, then another. Then I screen recorded the entire story in case it disappeared. Habit, documentation, control. My fingers moved automatically, but inside something colder was settling into place. Not panic, not even rage, just clarity. Because this was the mistake. Up until now, everything Ethan had done could be framed as entitlement, desperation, even stupidity. This was deliberate, public, and provable. I forwarded everything to Harrison. Then I waited. His response came 10 minutes later. "Good. Don't engage publicly." That was it. No outrage, no urgency, just strategy. I typed back. "He's accusing me of abuse." Yes. People will believe it. Some will. That didn't make me feel better. What do we do? There was a pause before his next message. Then, we let him finish. I stared at the screen. Finish what? The reply came almost immediately, making his case for us. I leaned back slowly against the kitchen counter, the phone still in my hand. For the first time since seeing the post, I smiled, because I understood. Every lie requires consistency. Every narrative needs reinforcement. And the more someone talks, the more they reveal. Ethan had just taken a private situation and made it public, which meant everything that followed would no longer be contained. Not the texts, not the demands, not the move-out incident, not the attempted removal of property, not the lawyer's letter. He had opened the door. Now he would have to stand in whatever came through it. By afternoon, Lena messaged again. "It's getting bad." "How bad?" "People at the gallery are talking about it openly. The director saw it." I exhaled slowly. "And?" "You know how they are about reputation." "Yes, I did." A few minutes later, another message came. He didn't take it down. Of course he didn't. Because in his mind, it was working. The silence from me looked like guilt. The lack of public defense looked like confirmation. But something else was happening too. The story was colliding with reality. That evening, Lena sent another message. "I think you should know. Not everyone believes him." That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was what came next. "Some of the staff remember you from events. They know you funded everything." I didn't reply right away, because I didn't need to. The story was already shifting, slowly, quietly, without me lifting a finger. By Monday morning, the cracks had widened. Lena called this time instead of texting. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she said as soon as I picked up, "but it's already out there." "What is?" "He got called into the director's office." I closed my eyes briefly. "And?" "They didn't accuse him directly, but they asked questions about the post, about the situation, about whether there was any risk of reputational damage to the gallery." "Of course they did." "And what did he say?" "He doubled down." I almost laughed. Because once someone commits to a lie publicly, they rarely retreat. They escalate. "What happened after?" There was a pause. Then Lena said quietly, "They told him his internship wasn't a good fit anymore." I opened my eyes and stared out at the city. "Just like that?" "Just like that. No formal accusation, no dramatic investigation, just distance. Because in a world built on perception, proximity to drama is liability." And Ethan had just made himself radioactive. I thanked Lena and ended the call. Then I stood there in my apartment, phone in hand, and let the reality settle. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't defended myself. I hadn't retaliated. And yet the consequences had started, not because I caused them, because he did. That afternoon, another message came through, not from Ethan, from Harrison. He attached a draft. Cease and desist. Defamation. Clear, precise, devastating. I read it once, then again. Every sentence backed by evidence. Every claim supported by documentation I had quietly been collecting since the moment he sent that first text. This wasn't emotion. This was structure. And structure, once set in motion, doesn't need force. It just needs time. After the post, everything went quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of silence. Before, it had been tension, a pause between moves. Now it felt like aftermath. I didn't contact Ethan. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I finished what I had already started. I closed the apartment lease properly, paid the penalty, signed the final documents. Clean, documented, done. I settled the last utility bills, canceled anything that still had his name attached to it. And then, on a gray Wednesday morning, I let the movers come back one last time, not to take anything out, but to give it away. The couch, the bed, the desk he used to sit at while talking about his future like it was something we both owned. All of it went to a local charity that helped families rebuild after losing everything. I stood there while they carried it out, piece by piece. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it leave. Not as loss, as closure. When the last truck door shut, the apartment felt different. Not empty, light, like something heavy had finally been removed. That was the moment I knew I was done. Not just with Ethan, with the version of myself that had made space for someone who didn't understand its value. The legal side wrapped up shortly after. Harrison sent the cease and desist along with a final letter. Simple, cold, final. Any further attempt to pursue financial claims would be met with a countersuit covering damages, legal fees, mover costs, and a separate defamation case based on documented false statements. He attached evidence, everything. The text, the demands, the attempted settlement, the move-out incident, the screenshots of Ethan's own words. There was no response. No rebuttal. No final threat. Just silence. They folded, exactly the way Harrison said they would. That should have been the end. But it wasn't, because the real ending didn't come from the law. It came from somewhere else. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Lena. Subject line, "Thought you should see this." I hesitated before opening it, not because I was afraid, but because I already knew whatever was inside wouldn't surprise me. It would only confirm what had already started. The email was short. "Hey, things got messy after he left, but this showed up today. Figured you deserved to know." There was a link attached. I clicked it. It led to a public Facebook post written by Ethan's father. I didn't know what I expected. An apology, maybe. An attempt to defend his son. Something controlled. What I got instead was something else entirely. It was long, unfiltered, painfully honest. He didn't name me directly, but he didn't have to. He talked about his son walking away from a stable, supportive relationship for what he called a fantasy built on appearances. He talked about pride, about bad choices, about the difference between real support and performative attention. And then he said something that made me stop scrolling. He had a foundation under him, and he chose to walk off it for someone who promised him a view. I kept reading. The rest unfolded exactly the way it had been building toward. Vanessa wasn't who she claimed to be. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't powerful, she was simply adjacent to the image of money and status, the kind of person who could perform luxury better than she could sustain it. The lifestyle was debt, the confidence was borrowed, the stability was non-existent, and once Ethan stepped into that world without mine supporting it, everything collapsed. Fast. According to the post, The fallout from the social media drama spread quickly through the small art community. The internship was already gone. His reputation had gone with it. Vanessa didn't stay either. Of course she didn't. People like her don't stay when the resources disappear. They relocate. The breakup was explosive, public, ugly, exactly the kind of ending that leaves no room for rewriting. By the time it was over, Ethan had nothing left to negotiate with. No apartment, no car, no internship, no standing in the scene he had tried so hard to enter. He moved back home, according to his father, with debt, consequences, and silence. I finished reading the post and sat there for a long time, not reacting, just absorbing, because this was it. Not revenge, not justice in the dramatic sense. No confrontation, no final argument, no moment where he stood in front of me and admitted anything. Just gravity. Everything he had done, every assumption, every entitlement, every attempt to control the narrative had simply played out exactly as it was always going to. My phone buzzed softly. A message from Lena. You okay? I looked at the screen, then typed back. I'm fine. And for the first time since all of this started, I meant it. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel anything dramatic at all. Just quiet. Like a chapter had closed without needing a final sentence. I thanked her for sending it. We exchanged a few more messages. Normal ones. Simple, easy, the kind of conversation that doesn't carry weight. And when it ended, I realized something. Not everyone was like Ethan. Not everyone needed to take in order to feel secure. Not everyone confused support with entitlement. That mattered more than I expected. I haven't heard from him since. No apology, no explanation, no attempt to reach out. And honestly, I don't need one. Because the version of him I would have wanted to hear from doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it never did. What I do know is this. You can give someone everything, support their dreams, build a life around the idea of us, and still lose them. Not because you weren't enough, but because they were never built to value what you gave. That's not something you fix. It's something you walk away from. And when you do, you don't need revenge. You don't need closure from them. You don't even need answers. Because sooner or later, everything balances. Not loudly, not dramatically, just inevitably. And when it does, you don't feel powerful. You just feel free.